is the module 3 or chapter 4 slides. Part 3 maybe. Just one sec. So there's no, well actually I could have done it. Can try it next time, perhaps. I just follow, if you want to see the actual slides themselves, I just follow along with another device. But we could actually, maybe I could probably, because the keyboard's reachable and the screen's kind of turned, so maybe I could, when I'm done reading a page, I could just go to the next one. We can try that with the next one. So this one is working with container collapse. Oh, I forgot my sunglasses here. So working with container collapse. Container collapse is an empty container with no content. So container, they use that term a lot in programming. It's an object that can hold things, store things. Sometimes the languages have different theories on it. But they usually use containers in graphical user interface languages. So elements in the container are floated. So this is a different definition than the type of float. The type of data type float, I believe. They actually literally mean floating around on the screen, I think. There's a diagram here. This, so maybe it could help understand if you kind of flip the slides after the page. You can try that after. But then again, usually you don't look at the screen. But you could, it might help, so we'll try that. So it has, actually maybe I'll just make a note here. To do that after. Because all the chair is kind of uncomfortable, so that's why I moved back over here. Okay, so it says container doesn't enclose floated content. So that's at the top of the diagram. So there's this diagram, it's split in two. So the top says container doesn't enclose floated content. Okay, so basically it's just showing that the objects are outside the container, which is the container's a box, a bigger box, and the objects are 3 smaller rectangles. Then it's like container expanded to enclose floated content. Now the boxes are within the larger rectangle, or sorry, the smaller rectangles are within the larger box, which is a rectangle. So it's showing that the container is storing the objects, and before the container is not storing the objects. So working with container collapse continued. Use the after pseudo element to add a placeholder element after the footer. So why is it pseudo? pseudo element. I think is that a type in? Might be a type. They didn't. I don't know if they explained it that well, but it might be a type in web design. So we have. So the general style rule is container colon after space open a block. I mean, then clear colon space both semicolon new line content colon space an empty string double quoted string semicolon new line then display colon space table semicolon close the blocks. Whatever that is, it's quite confusing, so they haven't really explained it. So it says where a container is the selector for the element containing floating objects. Where a container. Where container is a selector for the element containing floating objects. So I think for this you just have to practice the codes again to understand what's happening. So working with container collapse continued, the clear property keeps the placeholder element from being inserted until both margins are clear of floats. The clear property keeps the placeholder element from being inserted until both margins are clear of floats. I'm not really sure what they mean by that. Then they have the element itself is a web table and contains an empty text string. Now it's a different topic, so it says page layout grids. So page layout grids. A grid layout arranges the page content within grid rows and grid columns floated inside those rows. So that's exactly the same definition from whenever we used a grid before in Android. And it says red outline indicates the location of grid rows and columns. So that might be in the design window. Actually, I don't think there is a design window. So perhaps it's pointing. So does it actually show that on the screen? You'd have to see, or on the web page, I mean. Then it says grid rows are displayed starting on a new line. And it says the grid columns are floated with their rows. So overview of grid-based layouts. Rows and columns form a grid. The number of rows, so subpoint, the number of rows is based on the page content. The number of rows is based on the page content. Number of rows. So my rows go down. columns go across. The number of columns is based on the number that provides the most flexibility in laying out the page content. That's exactly the same, basically the same thing. Which, remember, grids are kind of confusing. Don't think there's a design. Is there a design window in CSS? I don't think there is. There might be, but I don't think they weren't teaching us how to use it that way. So, overview of grid-based layouts. The grid columns. Which is just a diagram of grid columns, the space between the rows. Grid rows, the space between the columns. So there's space between the columns this time. And the rows. Which is like an imaginary, sometimes double boxed. Double kind of like dotted lines. It's almost like a checkerboard, but well, yeah, that's what it is, but it's like a double, so it's like a checkerboard, but has the lines, like imagine a checkerboard with single lines, but this time they have double lines with a little space in between for all the rows and columns, so it's like a double, like double checkerboard, or chessboard, whatever. So overview of grid-based layouts. Continued 2. Advantages of using a grid. So subpoints of that are grids add order to the presentation of page content. A consistent logical design gives readers the confidence to find the information they seek. It is easily accessible for users with disabilities and special needs. Not sure how that works. So it increases the development speed with a systematic framework for the page layout. Increases the development speed. Okay, so the development speed it can increase. Like they mean like the development of the web page, whatever. So now the next one is fixed and fluid grids. So fixed grids. Every column has a fixed position. Subpoint that is widths of the columns and margins are specified in pixels. Okay, so this goes back to the fixed and fluid theory. The next one here is, or the next part is, like the next point is fluid grids. So it provides more support across different devices with different screen sizes. Provides more support across different devices, different screen sizes. The column width is expressed in percentages in that case. So it seems to be the same kind of theory. So fixed, it's like a fixed size. You have a web page, you load it on different screens, different devices, it's going to look the same. But the thing, sorry, not look the same, it's going to look different because each screen has its own resolution in pixels. In this case, we set it to like 1000 by 1000 pixels. Then you may only get a portion of the web page that displays like a fraction of it on one screen. If you go load up another screen that's like smaller or bigger, it'll probably look different. And some of the parts of the screen may be cut off. But for fluid grids in that case, or just fluid designs, and it would adapt to the screen size, make the changes, and then so that it's expressed to a percentage of the screen. That's how they do it. So it's kind of smart actually. So it's like, well, in this case you want to set the pixels for fixed, but in the other case for fluid grids you want to set the screen size to like 25% of the screen. We want to do this. So in that case, 25% of like 4 different size screens will all be the same. It may look slightly different, but you'd be able to see the whole page at least. Okay, so the next one is CSS frameworks. So a framework is a software package that provides a library of tools to design a website. So the point of that is include style sheets for grid layouts and built-in scripts to provide support for a variety of browsers and devices. So the next point is some popular CSS frameworks include, so Bootstrap, so you've heard of that many times, like on YouTube and all that. And the rest I haven't heard of, which is YAML4, the 960 grid system, and Foundation 3, so I've never heard of any of those except for Bootstrap, so I think Bootstrap is the one that you want to learn. Then they have here setting up the grid. So a grid layout is based on rows of floating elements. A grid layout is based on rows. One second, let me just get my glasses here, because it's bothering my eyes here. 1 second. So it says, no. Camera recording, okay. So setting up a grid layout is based on rows of floating elements. So each floating element constitutes a column. The set of elements floating side by side establishes a row. Many grid layouts use the div or division element to mark distinct rows and columns of the grid. Is that different than the div that they showed us before? It doesn't specify that, but it looks like it's the same thing. Actually Actually, I'm not sure if it is, but it looks like when you look at the code, it looks the same. It looks confusing, so it says setting up a grid. Continued. This is an example of a simple grid consisting of a single row with 2 columns. So this looks like HTML. So it's open angular bracket, div space class points to the string row, close angular bracket, new line indent, angular bracket div space class points to the string column 1, close the string, close the angular bracket, open another angular bracket, slash div, close angular bracket, new line, and the exact same thing, but so it's angular bracket div space class points to the string column 2. In this case, close the string, then angular bracket slash div or div, then close angular bracket. New line. Then we have angle bracket slash div, close angle bracket. So the page content is placed within the div elements. Okay, so it's pretty confusing. It's not really explaining what's happening. You can always just ask ChatGPT about. Consisting of a single row with 2 columns. So they said div means division element. What is the division element? Many grid layouts use the div. So many grid layouts use the div or division element to mark distinct rows and columns of the grid. I don't really understand, to be honest. You'd have to see the whole example in the textbook. Division element. Maybe try to look that up actually. See if that'll help. Okay, so this makes more sense. So what it says is the angle bracket div, angle bracket tag defines a division or a section in an HTML document. So not just a division. So what the slide's definition said is Many grid layouts use the div or division element to mark distinct rows and columns of the grid. So it just says it's a div element. So div or division element to mark distinct rows and columns of the grid, but you'd assume that the grid already marks distinct rows and columns itself, so that didn't really help. But this definition says from W3 Schools is that the div tag defines a division or a section of an HTML document. It's almost like a fragment, it seems, and I think it might actually be like a fragment in Android. Then it says, so remember what it does is it defines a section of, I think it defines a section of the page, so it's like a part of it, like a piece of it. It doesn't say that though. It says the div tag is used as a container for HTML elements. So the div tag is used as a container. So it's used as a container to store things, which is then styled with CSS or manipulated with JavaScript. The div tag is easily styled by using the class or ID attribute. Any sort of content can be put inside the div tag. That's pretty much the whole page. It's just like it supports these few attributes, that's it. Okay, so there's no example on that. Or, based on that part of the definition of W3 Schools. So then now it says pretty much. So the next page is, actually that's what it is. So I think what it's doing is it's actually just creating a class for each row and column. Which is a little tricky because it didn't explain classes that well. You'd have to go back and check. Okay, just 1 sec here. Have some water. also gets a little tired from looking at screens, but I don't really have a choice because these slides are on a computer. Oh, you know what, let's try the blue, I don't think the night light's on, let's try that. Alright, that's a bit better. I'm setting up a grid. It says proposed grid layout for the About Daisy Chocolate's page. Okay, so it's like first row is the title-ish, or like the header, I guess. It says About Pandacia Chocolates. Okay. It's a little tricky. But I think it's showing that where it points to the row. It's not always exact, but I think it's showing that the bottom line is the end of the row. So then after that, then it's like okay, let's see here, actually one sec. So it gets a little tricky. Then it's like second row. Then it's like a 2x2 grid nested within the first column of the second row within the first column of the second row. Okay, so then it puts another grid nested in. That can get tricky. Then it's like the third row is the next one. It's like first column and second column. It's not exactly proportional. So it is kind of tricky. You probably have to play around with it to learn it better. Sec here. So the code for the grid layout for the Pandacia Chocolates website is as follows. Okay, so there's some code here. So you can look at the code itself. I don't think me saying this was really going to help anything because it's kind of confusing. try. That's like, so it's like angle bracket slash header, close angle bracket. New line, then angle bracket div space class points to the string row. Last one. Okay, so then we have close the div basically, so the div tags you have to open and close them pretty much. Actually, no. Actually, yes. Okay, so you close the row. Then it's like, okay, that's the first row. Once it's closed, so it's like they're naming the same thing. You can name the same thing twice, it looks like, the classes, which I don't really understand how they can do that. Didn't really explain all of that. I think maybe you'd want to maybe ask ChatGPT or something. Okay, so we'll probably just come back to this after. I don't really understand how they're naming the same class over and over again. They didn't really tell us any information about classes. Like, yeah, this is how you do a class, and you can name it. There's rules for this. You can name it once. You can name it many times. Didn't really say what that stuff. So perhaps maybe I'd check the textbook under classes. I'll probably just stop it there for now, and then I'll do